In this lesson, we're going to cover assembly features. An assembly feature can consist of a work plane, a work axis, and a work point, and it also can consist of an extrusion or revolve or a fillet, any operation that will remove material. The file that we're going to use in this exercise is called assemblyfeature.iam, and it can be found in your Chapter 9 exercise folder. We're going to start off by placing in some assembly work features, in this case work planes and axes. From the assembly panel, we're going to scroll on down, and you'll see that we have work planes, axes, and points, and you're going to work with them exactly the same in this environment at the assembly level as you would at the part level. So for example, I can go back and place in a work plane based on the edge of the top green part and maybe of an edge down at one of the lower bottom plates. Now, this work plane that we just created, it only exists here at the assembly level. Obviously, we selected two separate parts. It wouldn't make any sense to have that existing at the part level. So we can create these work planes exactly the same way that you would at the part level. So next I'm going to select the work axes tool, and let's go ahead and select 2 points. And just like the work plane, you'll see that the work axis goes through those 2 points, even though they are associated back to 2 separate parts. For example, for the work point, if I pick the top plane of the green part, and let's select the front vertical plane of the middle plate and the right face of the bottom plate, you'll see that our work point has been placed in based on the geometry that I selected from the 3 separate parts. If you look at the browser, let's push this up a little bit, you'll see that the work plane, the axes, and the point that we selected are existing here in the browser, just like it would at the part level. If you go down and select on that, it's going to go back and it's going to show us how the information was created and what constraints are actually being applied to it, so it's maintaining that relationship. So let's minimize those, and for clarity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and delete out the work axes and the point. For the rest of our example, we won't need that. So what I'd like to do next is create an assembly feature. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this work feature in the same manner that we would if we were at the part level. I'm going to make the work plane the active sketch. So let's change the visibility so we can see through all the parts, and I'm going to change it to a wireframe display. I'm just going to draw in a 2-point rectangle. And then at this point we could go back and place in some dimensions if needed. So if I said general dimension, of course I could go back and dimension the rectangle itself. So let's put that in at 220 versus 75. And now when I start to dimension that back up to the part, you'll see that it's not picking up any of the edges of the part. So what I need to do is I'm going to select the Project Geometry tool, and then I'm going to select edges of the part to project forward, and right-click Done. And now when I go back and place my dimensions on there, I can now dimension to those edges. So in this example, let's pull it 75 millimeters off the top face, and let's place it 20 millimeters in from that side, and then go ahead and click Return. And you'll notice in the browser it's showing me Sketch 3 with an end of features marker. So this is telling me that this is an assembly feature, and that's where a lot of people will make mistakes. It's very easy to go back and create these assembly features. You'll notice that the sketch button is available right at the top level at the assembly. So we'll run through another example. Just be aware when you're placing in that sketch, are you in the assembly environment or the part environment? So next, let's take a look at the tools that are available for us to create that assembly feature. Again, just scrolling down from the assembly panel, and let's push the browser down just a little bit. You'll notice that we have an extrude, revolve, we can place in hole features, sweep, fillets, and chamfers. In this example, I'm just going to go back and do an extrude, and you'll see that it picked up immediately the rectangle that we had for the profile. The only operation that is available while placing in an assembly feature, you'll notice, is going to be cut. We cannot add material or we cannot do an intersect. So all we can do with these assembly features is remove material. So next you can define the extents. So from the drop down, what do we want to do? So the to, from to, all. So let's do the to option. And I'll come back and select the top plane here and go ahead and click OK. And let's change our display back to shaded. And you'll see exactly what happened, right? The plane that I selected is exactly where that feature is stopping at. I can go back and change that just like you would at the part level. I'm going to edit the extrusion, edit feature, and let's change the extents to all. So I want to cut all the way through. And you'll see that it's now going through all three parts. So now, let's go back and let's delete that feature. And let's switch to an isometric view. And I want to talk a little bit more about creating that sketch feature. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and delete the work plane that we created at the assembly level. And what I want to show here is you don't have to have a work plane created to create an assembly feature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Sketch, pick the top plane of our green part, and now we'll work the exact same way at the assembly level as though we would at the part level. So I'll draw in my geometry. We can place in our dimension, but again, before I do that, what I need to do is go back and project these edges forward. So that would be the major difference here at the assembly level, is that it will not project those edges forward immediately for us. So now let's go back, apply a couple dimensions. So now let's return, and again from the assembly panel we'll scroll on down, click on the extrude tool, and now for the extents let's go all the way through. Let's go ahead and click OK. Rotate our screen. We'll see that it's definitely going through all of those components. Now you may not always want it to roll through all of the components. You can control which components that extrusion is going through by expanding the feature in the browser, in this case extrusion 4, and you'll notice that all of my parts are showing up in the browser. So in this case, if I selected the plate 2 and did a right mouse click, I can remove that participant from this feature. And when I did that, you'll notice that that feature is no longer going through that component, even though it's going through the very last plate. So to add a component back in, we're going to do just the opposite. I'm going to now right click on extrusion for the parent, and we're going to add participant. So go ahead and click on add participant. In the graphics window, I'm going to select my part that I want, and you'll see that the feature has gone all the way through. So next, let's go ahead and place in a hole feature. So I'll go ahead and select on the hole tool. And you see again we have our same options that you would at the part level. What I'll do is I'll select on the linear option. And for the face, let's go ahead and just pick a point on the face. And then I'll select two edges. In this case, you'll see that Inventor is going to automatically project those edges for us. And let's make it a fairly large hole so we can see it. Maybe not quite that large. Let's try it at 50. And let's go all the way through. So now just to prove what an assembly feature is. So these assembly features, as I said earlier in the lesson, only exist here in this assembly. So if I right click on that part and open it, we'll see none of my extrusions, my cuts, are showing up here. If I happen to take this exact same component and place it inside of another assembly, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to open up a new assembly file, and I'm going to split the screen. So now if I go back and grab one of the plates and pull it into the new assembly, so I'm going to switch to an isometric view. In this case I just pressed the F6 key, but you'll see that the plate that we just put into our brand new assembly, the cut does not exist. It's only existing here at the assembly that we placed in that cut.